Hello. We are from Ukraine. 200 days of defense of Kharkiv region, how the region resists military challenges. Power. Head of Hova Oleg Senegubov met with residents of deoccupied Balaklia on September 13. For more than 200 days, Kharkiv Oblast has continuously held back the onslaught of Russian invaders. The head of Hova, Oleg Senegubov, spoke about the victories and challenges facing the region today in an interview with Dunsi. The Ukrainian flag is flying again. Kharkiv Oblast has been heroically resisting the Russian invasion for more than 200 days. And in the last few days, our region has been in the news all over the world, all thanks to the lightning-fast counteroffensive of the armed forces of Ukraine. One by one, there are reports about the deoccupation of many settlements in the Kharkiv region. At the same time, the official reports of the General Staff are very discreet. There are already hundreds of deoccupied settlements. Currently, we can talk about more than 300. We cannot announce this figure yet, taking into account the interests of the military operation of our armed forces, which is currently ongoing, emphasized the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration Oleg Senegubov. At the same time, he noted that a significant part of the territories of the Kharkiv and Kupion districts, as well as the Balaklia community, have already been liberated from the occupiers. It all started with defense. Today's victories of the armed forces could not have been had it not been for the competent defense of the region. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion in the Kharkiv region, the interaction of local authorities at all levels and the military command has been established and practiced. According to the Regional Military Administration, an echelon defense was built along the contact line, and the communities took an active part in it. In general, local authorities actively help the military in equipping and strengthening defense structures with special equipment, construction materials and labor. This is a fundamental construction in order, firstly, to protect our soldiers as much as possible, to make their stay in advanced positions relatively safe. Secondly, it increases their effectiveness and ensures the conditions for waging war even in such weather conditions. We will soon have winter, said the head of Hova Oleg Senegubov in an interview with Dunsi. According to him, there was no such systematic approach to defense and the construction of fortifications on the scale of the region and each settlement. However, he emphasized that it is not safe and appropriate to speak more specifically about the defense of Kharkiv Oblast at the moment. People are coming back. The population began to return to Kharkiv Oblast. Before the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation, the population of the region was 2.6 million people, of which about 1.5 million were Kharkiv residents. As of the 200th day of resistance to the Russian invasion, 672,000 people left Kharkiv Oblast, along with 288,000 residents who left the areas of hostilities without leaving the territory of the region. Currently, 387,700 displaced people are officially registered in the region, including residents of Kharkiv region who have moved to other regions, and residents of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Hova emphasizes that temporary housing, humanitarian aid and basic necessities are provided to all who need it. Currently, we state that 1 million people have already returned to Kharkiv. I vividly remember the first week or two of the war, when there were actually a dozen or two civilian cars on the streets that we all knew. Most of the people hid in shelters, basements, warehouses, subways, etc. According to our calculations, at that time there were approximately 300 to 400,000 people left in the city of Kharkiv, says Oleg Senegubov. Work of the humanitarian headquarters. The humanitarian headquarters coordinates the work of volunteer organizations regarding humanitarian assistance to military and civilians. It was created in the early days of a full-scale invasion. At present, work on the delivery of humanitarian aid through Ukropashta branches in Kharkiv and other populated areas of the region is fully established in the Kharkiv region. Targeted humanitarian aid is provided to internally displaced persons. Only as of September 1, 215,800 IDPs in Kharkiv region received such assistance for a total amount of 3.1 billion hryvnias. There are still about 70,000 applications for targeted assistance in the works. Oleg Senegubov assures that the regional humanitarian headquarters has adequate reserves for providing assistance to the deoccupied territories. As many products as necessary will arrive in the liberated settlements. Humanitarian convoys are already being sent to the recently deoccupied territories. Economic situation. Despite the daily shelling of Kharkiv and various districts of the region has preserved a certain economic potential. A huge front line of work is performed by agrarians. Thus, harvesting of early grain and leguminous crops has been completed in the controlled territories of Lozov, Krasnograd, and Kharkiv districts. And industrial enterprises, according to the head of HOVA, are currently operating at 50 to 60% of their pre-war capacity. In total, there are 125,000 small and medium-sized businesses in Kharkiv region, approximately 60 to 70,000 of them remain to work in the region. And those who left and work in other regions still continue to take an active part in helping the region and volunteering. Despite all the difficulties of the war, as of today, we have achieved implementation of the regional and local budgets at the level of 80%. Taking into account the scale of the destruction of enterprises, we predict a decrease in this number by the end of the year. However, active measures are being taken in the region to support business and industry, which should minimize the loss of budget revenues, Oleg Senegubov emphasized. Small and medium-sized businesses in Kharkiv region are gradually gaining momentum, people are returning to Kharkiv and even to recently deoccupied communities. They visited some settlements that were recently liberated by our armed forces. We heard from the local population that people are already ready to return there. And our task is to restore the extremely damaged, even completely destroyed infrastructure in places as quickly as possible. These are electricity grids and gas supply, because without it is extremely difficult to survive in these territories, especially since winter is coming, said the head of HOVA. Preparation for winter. According to Oleg Senegubov, the heat economy of Kharkiv Oblast is technically prepared for the new heating season by 73.3%. The article on the preparation of the region for a difficult winter was published in the last issue of SK. Editor's note. At the same time, the head of HOVA notes that about 90% of homes in Kharkiv region are heated with gas. People do not have alternative sources of heating. The situation is complicated by enemy shelling. The occupiers deliberately hit critical infrastructure in order to leave the population without light, heat and water. In the deoccupied territories, we make operational decisions to prepare for the heating season. But if we talk, for example, about the city of Izium, the situation there is extremely difficult and critical. This will be a new challenge for us, Oleg Senegubov noted. In addition, in the Kharkiv region, 340 stationary heating points will be prepared for the population, which will be able to accommodate about 7,000 people. Also, the military administration plans to purchase 200 field tents with heaters, stoves, field beds, and bio-toilets. Charitable and volunteer organizations, structures of the State Emergency Service are actively involved in the work on the preparation of heating points. Thousands of evacuees. Since May 30, 16,227 people, including 3,708 children, have been evacuated from the temporarily occupied territories of Kharkiv region. It was possible to do this thanks to the active cooperation of military administrations, law enforcement agencies, volunteer organizations and the State Emergency Service. Evacuees receive medical and psychological assistance upon arrival in territories controlled by Ukraine. People are also provided with temporary housing and humanitarian aid as needed. Currently, the region is preparing for the mandatory evacuation of the population from certain districts. HOVA explains that, first of all, they determine the number of people who need special transport. Some can leave with their own car. The evacuation of domestic animals and zoos, etc., is also taken into account. In particular, there is talk of evacuation in the Bogoduev district, Zolokiv, Dergachev and Chugiv communities. Evacuation plans have already been developed and worked out with the heads of communities, units of the State Emergency Service, the National Police and the Security Service of Ukraine. So that people understand, there is mandatory evacuation and there is optional evacuation. In wartime, when we speak and recommend to evacuate, people should take it as their duty. Because it is, after all, related to security, emphasized the head of Kharkiv Regional Administration. Thank you for watching. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to Ukrainian defenders.